بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. Ayah today we're looking at, and which is 2277. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعذ بالله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اركعوا واسجدوا واعبدوا ربكم وافعلوا الخير لعلكم تفلحون. Just before this ayah, Allah mentions that, وإلى الله ترجع الأمور, and to Allah return the affairs, or affairs. The affairs turn back to Allah. يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم وإلى الله ترجع الأمور. He knows what is in front of them and what is behind them, and to Allah return the affairs. So all affairs return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if the affairs, which is everything, as Shaikh Ibrahim mentions, everything is returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without exception. If everything is always returning to Allah, then nothing has ever left Him. And then after that He says, O you who have believed, in other words, O those of you who have believed in Allah's eternal or pre-eternal knowledge, believe. Right? Irka'u, so prostrate. Wasjudu, so prostrate and make sujood. Wa'abudu, and worship Rabbakum, your Lord. Waf'alul khayra la'allakum tuflihun, and do good that you may succeed. So what is the good that we are commanded to? Waf'alul khayra, so the command to do is not, the command is not to do good in general, it's to do the good. Waf'alul khayra, and do the good. As when we get the impression that the good here is one thing, and then so those who are vying to do good may say that, well, good here means to learn. Another may say, no, good here means to pray, or to be a worshipper. One would say, no, good is khidmah. No, good is this, good is that, and on and on and on. So each person, according to their, well, before we get ahead of ourselves, what is the good according to Shaikh Ibrahim? What does he intend by that? What does he understand by that, rather? And what is the good as far as Shaykh al-Islam is concerned? He says that there are many doors of good. His response: there are many doors of good. There are voluntary ones like prayer during the night, voluntary fasting, spending one's wealth, infaq, reading the Qur'an, the remembrance of Allah, salutations upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, visiting the house of Allah. These are the different acts of good that he mentions. So he mentions multiple acts, even though the ayah itself, it says waf'alul khayra, and do the good, la'allakum tuflihun. So what's happening? He's mentioning multiple. He says that there are many, and they're kind of vast in terms of what he said, and he's not mentioned one in particular, even though the ayah mentions one, the good. One could construe this, one could understand this to be the case. And then also, on a sort of a more philosophical level, what is good? Is good that which benefits people's health? Is good that which makes one popular amongst their colleagues is the good. That which gives one long life is the good. That which protects people from harm. What is the good? And here, every good that he mentions here, if you notice, or you could ask yourself, what is the common denominator in every good here? In other words, what is the good that Allah is mentioning, at least in terms of category of actions? If it's not a specific act, if Shaikh Ibrahim is not mentioning a specific act, then what category of actions does it go under? And one could say that, well, the good is anything that draws one close to Allah. So, for example, praying in the night does this, voluntary fasting does this, spending one's wealth, infaq, does this, reading the Qur'an does this, reverence of Allah does this, salutations upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, definitely does this. As Shaikh Ibrahim has made it clear that there is no door to Allah except through the Prophet, peace be upon him. And visiting the house of Allah. So what we can say is that while Shaikh Ibrahim hasn't made clear the difference between, thus far, why Allah told us to do the good, yet he's mentioning so many goods, we can say what they all have in common is that they are acts which draw one close to Allah. So why is Shaikh Ibrahim saying multiple goods? Why is there not only one good? Or why is there not only one door? And then the other question might be, how does each one of these doors compare to the other? Which one's better? So Shaikh Ibrahim says that there are many different goods, you can say, many different good acts. And he said then people's temperaments differ. Okay, so he makes it clear that there are many different acts. So waf'alul khayra, the khair here is not any specific thing, but we could understand that it's those acts which draw one close to Allah. But these are different. Why are there so many different doors? Because people are different and their temperaments different. There are many different good acts, and people's temperaments differs. He said. He said perhaps one of Allah's servants receives an opening via prayer, via salah, and he does not receive one via fasting. So this is an interesting aspect of what Shaykh is saying. That also the will of Allah is such that some people are like this and some people like that. Allah has created people with different temperaments according to His will. And also, where it is He's written for them to have an opening is written for them to have an opening. Allah might write someone to have an opening through the prayer that He does not write for them via fasting. Okay, so you have different temperaments, and you also have where Allah's will fall with this person. So he says there are many different good acts, and people's temperaments differ. Perhaps one of Allah's servants receives an opening via prayer, and he does not receive one via fasting, right? Even though everyone prays and everyone fasts, even voluntarily. He says perhaps another of the servants receives an opening via fasting, while he does not receive one through pilgrimage. Perhaps one is given an opening through pilgrimage, and he does not receive one through reading the Qur'an. And perhaps one receives an opening reciting the Qur'an and does not receive an opening through spending. So while people are completely different, in other words, everyone's doing all these actions. But Allah has already written for each person where the opening will come for them. So he said that everyone finds a door from amongst the various doors of good. He finds an inclination towards it, and so he should simply stick to that. That's basically what he says. So In other words, Allah's will manifests in people if they pay attention. They realize that they already have an inclination towards this thing and not that thing. So some people, they recite Qur'an, everybody should recite Qur'an, but some people they find themselves really inclined towards it. And some people, they spend in the way of Allah, but some people really spend. Some people, they fast, and some people really fast. So how do you know which of the doors is best for you? Shaykh says everyone finds a door from amongst the various doors of good. He finds an inclination towards it, and so he should simply stick to that. That's what he says. Why? Shaykh Ibrahim says very clearly here, all good is equal. All good is equal. One of these voluntary acts of worship is not better than the other as such. What determines what's better is a case-by-case selection. And how does one know where their door is? It's by inclination. And maybe he doesn't list it here. For example, maybe some people, their door to Allah is teaching. They learn and they teach, and they find themselves inclined towards that. And so he should simply stick to that. Why? Because all good is equal. Shaykh Ibrahim says, all good is equal. وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ And do good that you may succeed. He says again, do good that you may succeed. In other words, do good, be consistent in the good you find yourself inclining towards, so that you might be successful. And then he mentions some hadith. He says, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, whoever clothes a naked person, Allah clothes him from the silk brocade of paradise. And he said, another hadith, whoever gives a thirsty person drink, Allah will give him a drink from the nectar of paradise. And then it says, he said, peace be upon him, whoever provides even a single morsel of food, Allah forgives him and frees him from the fire. These are different hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, stresses different types of good. And then he says, finally, all of these are from the doors of good. Alhamdulillah. All of these are from the doors of good, and as he said, and all good is the same. All good is the same. Not everybody is gifted in praying during the night. Not everyone is gifted at fasting voluntarily. Not everyone's gifted in spending in the way of Allah. Not everyone's gifted in being able to read the Qur'an, etc., etc., etc. But wherever he who knows himself knows his Lord, and he who knows himself also knows his way to his Lord. And so Shaykh Ibrahim said that let him stick to that, whichever way it is. Which is also interesting, because it also, even though he doesn't say it directly here, it also kind of gives an insight into knowing Allah's will for someone in certain things. It's like, whatever one finds their heart inclined towards, wherever they find themselves, that's Allah's will for them. So a lot of times people ask the question, well, how do I know what Allah wants from me? It's like, well, where do you find yourself consistently wanting over and over and over and over? It doesn't mean that it's not going to be a trial for you. It doesn't mean that. That doesn't mean that. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that it's not going to be a trial for you. But it's like, and just because Allah wants something for you doesn't mean it's not going to be a trial. So don't think that it's a get out. Don't think that, oh, well, Allah must want that for me, so it must be good. It's like, well, everything Allah does is good, because everything has a hikmah and a wisdom, but it doesn't mean you're going to like it. So let's not get the wrong idea. But anyway, Jazakallah khair. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.